So today it is an interesting topic which we have want to discuss it. So a lot of time we hear about India growth story, China plus one, and a lot of things how India is doing. And then somewhere in between, there's India startup ecosystem also comes in. And we thought, why don't we discuss about it for the from the practitioners who have been investing in India. So we have two gentlemen, Manoj Turakia and Shriram Rao, are from US and they are investing in India. And Adip and Shriram Sundaram Varnan is from India. They also has been a prolific angel investor. So we thought we'll have a balanced team and then let's discuss about how what is India growth story from the startup perspective. And while I was doing a little bit of research on that, some of the numbers was staggering for me. So between 2015 and 2012, there are almost 9x increase in the investors in India, startup investors in India, which I was not knowing about it kind of thing, which I thought was very interesting statistics. 7 times increase in the incubators and 15 times increase in the funding to the startups. So I think there's just three numbers signifies that there's so much of interest and so much of momentum is there building up from Indian startup, and everything is just beginning to happen. So while not talking much about the numbers in the larger picture, we just let's go into the more basics of the things what people have been doing it on the ground level. So before we start, maybe let's have a brief introduction from each one of you. So maybe Manoj, I'll start with you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Manoj Turkia. I basically am a retired professional based out of Boston in the US. I spent my career primarily in most of my career I spent in Fidelity Investments, where I was managing uh, basically some global groups over there, as well as was in multiple other roles. I've been investing with Sanjay and a little bit with others as well over the past 4 or 5 years since my retirement, especially in startups in India. Very excited about this journey and would be happy to share whatever I can with you guys.
Thank you, Manoj. Adip.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Adip Palchaudhary. I'm working for a company called Bamalori. It's actually a PSU under Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gases. So in the past, I've worked in consulting and IT and all of that. For the last several number of years, I worked with Bamalori. I'm a board member out there, responsible for the services portfolio, which is logistics and travel and vacations. Now, as part of the overall Startup India framework, PSUs are expected to have their startup funds with which they are supposed to invest in the startups, obviously. So I'm responsible for directing the startup fund for Bamal which is a very small number. And in the recent past, I've also, on my personal capacity, also engaged as an angel in one or two ventures. So this is the experience that I have, and I'll probably be sharing about the kind of framework that PSUs use, etc., because I'm not that much, I would say, experienced. Probably the others are in the startup journey, like say, for example, Manoj and Sanjay. Yeah.
Yeah, Adip, you are going to bring a very unique perspective, more from institutional and personal experience, so which is going to be very helpful. Yeah, Shriram Rao.
Hi guys, Sriram Rao. I'm based out of Michigan in the US, about 25 years as an NRI. I've seen several growth and opportunity cycles that have come in and gone. I see this as one of the growth potential and opportunity for myself. Currently, I'm a data and analytics engineering manager with one of the automotive firms in Michigan. And as for my association with startups, it started with I think Girish and Sanjay about 2 years ago, and I've invested in a couple of opportunities with Sarthi, and that's the experience I will share in this panel. Thank you.
Hi, Shriram. Shriram, you're on mute.
The other Sriram, yeah. Hi everyone, Sriram Sundaravadnan. I am an ex-banker with about 3 decades of experience now, post my moved from the Royal Bank of Scotland as a corporate banker, I started my own consultancy services. And then the investment in startup bug bit me. It started into an investment in a friend's startup, and that's how my journey began. I have had 6 investments in startups. I've had one company blowing up. I've had 2 exits. The other one I'm working towards an exit. The other one we are raising funds. And along with Sanjay, I was part of an accelerator program, and I decided that when we can do things for others, why not do things for ourselves? And that's how San Angels came into existence in November 21. Over there, I've had one investment and looking at one more now, evaluating them. So the journey has been wonderful. The India story is really kicking, and good to see that we are seeing more professionals now coming into the domain for investments. The other thing that really excites us is people from the US and Europe who are predominantly looking at India story and believing that things are happening. So happy to chug along in this journey.
Sanjay, you're
Yeah, thanks, Sriram. So maybe I think let's start from the beginning. How did you started your startup journey? I think from India context perspective, there are so many other investment opportunities. So what kind of prompted you to look at the startup ecosystem and how your journey started? No, so maybe I will Sriram Rao. Maybe we can start from you and then we can go around.
Yeah, so that is an interesting question. So as an NRI, you're always looking for capital appreciation, like whatever the means are. And there are obviously several opportunities available, equity markets in the US, obviously the stock markets and all of that, the real estate in the US as well as in India, and so on. So there are several opportunities. About 15, 20 years ago, real estate in India was the opportunity that was there, and it would double or triple in a few years. But that's fairly become the returns have become fairly stagnant there. And if you think about other opportunities, startup is the happening opportunity right now for us in India. And as to your question as to how I got started with it, I mean, obviously, I have been investing a little bit in the startup ecosystem in the US. And even though the startup ecosystem in the US is fairly mature, you do not get a ringside view of how these startups work and how they function, because you just get to invest money and that's about it. So I wanted a closer ringside view as to how those startups emerge and grow. And when I got in touch with Sarthi Angels and how they function with pre-series funding companies, you get to understand the dynamics and the logistics around how these companies operate. And that was very exciting for me. So in not just in terms of capital appreciation, but having the visibility into how these startups function, that was something very eye-opening and something I wanted to learn, as I see that as a potential growth opportunity for myself and as a career for myself. So that's where it started.
Thank you, Sanjay. So my journey started basically upon my retirement from Fidelity 5 years ago. And I was looking to see where I can invest money and where I can participate a little bit in the journey. So similar to Sriram in that sense. And to me, India is the place to be. Obviously, we all are familiar. We all are from India. So it's but more than that, it's the place to be because of the demographics that we have, because of the huge population that we have, because the middle class in this country, in India, is really growing so rapidly that the opportunities that this will bring to various startups will be enormous, in my opinion. And at the same time, we have a really talented pool of full of young entrepreneurs here in India. And I know that when I was growing up, this never even came to our mind because there was no ecosystem. But the ecosystem has come, and now the best brains from our best colleges, they really want to be in startups, and they do, and they. We have had several examples of great jobs that people have done in startups. So it's a very exciting place to be in. And I wanted to obviously see what I can do there and how I can help both with investments. And then secondly, at least bring some perspective from a country like US, having lived there for 30 years, I could possibly add some value to the startups to really, A, in terms of ideas, but B, also in terms of maybe collaborations with any US companies that might be useful. That's how I started my journey, and it's have invested in more than half a dozen companies, mostly with San Angels, but also outside with another angel network group, as well as with a friend and acquaintances.
Thanks, Manoj. Yeah, Shriram Sundarban, from your perspective, how did you, since you are in Indian ecosystems, how did you transition to Indian startups? No.
So, being in the banking circles, I've always dealt with small corporates, mid-sized corporates, and as a corporate banker, was handling large corporates. So, giving money to and assessing credit of companies came naturally because of my 20-year association in financial services and banking careers. But investment banking is a completely different ball game. So when I started my investments in 2015, one, it was new, the ecosystem was not that evolved in India. And since I didn't come from a investment banking background, there was nobody whom I could lean on. So it was typically I, me, myself, and with whatever knowledge that I had in the domain that I specialized, I had to rely on my instinct and a lot of money to sustain the startup when it was going down. Then over a period of time, subsequent investments brought in me in contact with other professionals. So today, when I look at a technology or a technical assessment, I have the support system, which I was not very comfortable about, or neither could I validate it. So for me, it is all about numbers, and numbers is just one small part of it, right? So assessing even a business plan, the way things a startup ecosystem evolved. So these are some of the things that helped me for a period of about 4 or 5 years. And so that is how the journey has been, hand-holding, taking baby steps initially to now, working alongside co-founders in the network ecosystem. That's been my journey, interesting. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, the Indians, I believe in the Indian story. So there are many more good things that are likely to come. And I think I would want to ride the wave of success in that period.
Yeah, thanks, Shriram. Yeah, Adip, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I actually represent, or I mean, my involvement with startups has been because of the institution. So, I mean, say for example, the other panelists, they talked about how they are looking at for capital appreciation. Somebody after retiring, looking at ventures, getting a ringside view, etc., etc. Now, for me, what happened is the chair that I occupy in the organization that is involved in handling the startups, and PSUs are required to get engaged. So that actually was a trigger for me. And very interestingly, so from 2016 onward, the Startup India program that has been there by the government of India, actually it filters through through the various PSUs. So for example, in our case, we are a small company, so we've got a small corpus, but then say for example, in Indian Oil would be having a very large corpus, very large reach out. Now, so to that extent, what has happened is that now when we are looking at investing, we are tying up with various members of the ecosystem. So for example, we are connected with IIM Calcutta's Innovation Park, which is an incubator. So we look at ideas coming through IITs, or for example, so we've got these kind of associations which help us in making sure that we are making the right kind of choice. But then for us, actually, we are not there really to make a 10x or something like that. We are out there to help the person go through the initial part and find its feet, and then probably figure out the next round. So, and we've had an exit also. So to that extent, we've actually lived through the cycle. We are looking at ideas who are kind of adjacent to our own businesses. So to that extent, so that we can support them. And say, for example, I know of, because our company is part of MOPNG, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gases, other companies which have got startup investments, they facilitate through their R&D access, etc., etc. So they are bringing the PSU ecosystem to the startups, which I think is very, very supportive. And this actually led for me to also look at on a personal side. And so I'm associated with a group of friends who have actually invested in one, but then we actually took the Let's Venture platform, and there was this other investment that we've done through Sarthi. So I've got 2 investments, and I'm looking at a couple of others personal side. And on the organization side, we've done maybe 3 investments, looking at 2 more. And the typical check size from the organization perspective would be around between 50 lakhs and 1.5 crores. Individual, obviously, it's much less.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you. I think just to add here a little bit is that one of the things which what I have seen is that many of the investor to just go into the startup journey is a big leap of faith kind of thing. And it is very similar to when you are going from when you are only investing in FD and suddenly you have to invest, somebody says you invest in the now the equity market, no? So that leap of faith is requires, I think, some hand holding and then getting the network and getting some guidance. And that is where I think lots of first time angel investors who are looking to get that guidance, I think there's sometimes there is also a challenge in terms of just to know the jargons of startup ecosystem. What is pre-money, what is post-money? I think that first time, a lot of first-time angel investors ask me those very basic questions that we don't understand this. Please explain us to that. No, I think that itself may be sometimes a stumbling box, or that doesn't bring that trust. Okay, I need to invest in the startup ecosystem. No. Yeah. So maybe going forward, it will be good to know what is your investment thesis, how you select your startups, and how you make your investment decisions. No. So Manoj, maybe we can start from you.
Okay, I can say that I do not have any specific formula. So it is basically there are several factors that come into play, and like first is I really would want to see that the founders really have passion for what they're doing, right? So this passion is not the only thing. Obviously, they need the competence as well. And the third aspect that I really look for is that the founders need, at least I need to have a perception that they are honest, right? Because trustworthiness is again a big trait that is out there. Obviously, that is a big piece, but maybe the biggest part is that the idea has to be something where there is a market fit and where they are able to really generate a lot of revenue and a lot of profits in the future, right? So that promise of really a unicorn, or if not a unicorn, somewhere close to that should be there, in my opinion, right? Otherwise, I could invest in equity markets. So the other thing I look at from that perspective is also the ability to scale. So there's always people can build up businesses with one sites, two sites. And again, there can be different types of businesses, but are the founders capable of scaling them? And do they have a plan to scale the businesses to the level where they can actually generate those 10x and 20x type of returns? Those are the things that I really look for. The fourth thing that I would look for is how easy is the idea to copy, right? So if it is really easy and the bar to entry for competitors is low, then the chances of success would basically diminish, right, to that extent. Having said all that, it still finally comes to gut feel in some sense as to, are you getting comfortable with the founders of their ideas and their ability?
Yeah. Thanks, Manoj. Yeah, Adip, you come from very interesting space of institutional plus personal. So how does you select your startup for you also and then for the institution also, no?
See, there are two parts. I mean, it's an interesting question, and I'll quickly firstly talk about institution, and then I'll talk about personal. And I'm seeing there is a little bit of synergy somewhere, but on the institution side, we are looking at adjacencies to our own business, because as a company, Bamalari has got, it's a diversified PSU. We've got logistics, we've got travel, we've got grease, we've got industrial packaging, and so on and so forth. Now, say for example, one of the startup that we've already invested in, they are actually in the travel space. Another couple of them which we are in the due diligence space, they are right now something which is adjacent to the aftermarket of auto, right? So which will kind of coincide with the grease and lubricants business, and the other is in the logistics space. Two others where we've already invested. One was in the drone, one is in the drone thing, and the other is in sustainability. But when I look at my personal investments, I've actually invested in one, I would say very broadly, an EdTech kind of a thing, which is a Bharat story. And I'm very keen, I hope that I'll be able to get into one construction finance space, which is also a Bharat story. So if I look at it personally, that's more of a reflection that I think I am looking at, or at least the way I think I'm guiding our institution also to look at, is stories which are going to make an impact in the Indian context. So it is the tech piece, etc., etc. If it is there, it is great. But if it is got the ability to scale and the market, the headroom, the runway is very large, if there is the ability to execute within the team. So, I mean, to come back and summarize, if that feeling or the conviction that there is an ability to execute, and the second is the runway large enough? Because India is such a large space. If you can execute, you can make it. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Thanks. Yeah, Shriram, you have done, I think, maybe in relative terms, a large investment in at least one startup and maybe a few more. So how do you select and then startups and then the obviously the quantum of funds investing in particular startup also, no?
Is
Shriram
that
Rao. Shriram Rao.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. So, my experience is relatively lesser than compared to other people. So I've been here in the last couple of years. So I'm not sector, I'm sector agnostic and segment agnostic. I'm looking to learn as much as possible. So so when I look at my opportunities, I have the opportunity to invest in the US or invest in India. So for me to invest in India, the opportunity has to be, so it has to be exponential. It has to have the potential to increase like 2 or 3x in X number of years. So it has to have that potential. And keeping the potential aside, any relationship that you have with a startup, it's going to be like a 5 to 7 year commitment that you're making with that startup. So again, comfort with the company, with the founders is very, very important, because you're going to have this relationship with them. And if the opportunity transcends to be what you wanted it to be, you're probably going to be investing more in that opportunity. So comfort level with the founders and their ability to execute is very important to me. And that's where the due diligence process that you bring in, that San Angels brings in, it's not just the pitch and then you invest like in the the shark tanks. It's the pitch, and then there is subsequent due diligence sessions that happen, and then you go into a deep dive due diligence. They come back with the due diligence report, and then you look into it a little bit more, and then you still have questions, and then that entire process has to be comfortable for me to be investing a large amount of money in this process, not just money, but the time investment that happens over a 5 to 7 year period. That has to be worth that. And so far that's been my criteria. But as I evolve, as I learn more, I think I'll be a little bit more sector, turning attention to a certain sector or a certain segment. But at this time, I'm sector and segment agnostic.
Yeah. Maybe Sriram, I will ask you one more question from the NRI perspective. What are the common mistakes which you think should be avoided? Any lessons learned from NRI perspective?
Yeah, so looking for quick investment and expecting investments to double up and triple up, and that's something that you have to correct. That's a long-term relationship. So that's something you have to think about. Two, if you are looking for very liquid investments where you're looking to pull money back pretty quickly, this is not the space for it. So you have to look at India startups as one part of your overall investment philosophy, and depending on your risk appetite, you got to say, I have the risk appetite to allocate X percentage. In my case, it's 5% of my overall allocation. I'm willing to invest in this. So you got to know yourself before you start investing in this space, and that's something only you can do yourself. And like I said, it's money that you put in for a longer period of time. The second thing is it depends on each person where you are in your NRI life cycle. If you are going to be a long-term NRI, then the tax implications, you have to understand the tax implications of what the investment is, and and that's only you can do. So that's something that you got to do yourself. So it's a long-term relationship, and two, it's the tax implications. So those are two areas where people have to be thoughtful about, before they start investing, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Sriram. Manoj, what are your views on that front?
So I totally agree with Sriram on both of those aspects that he mentioned. I think there's always, as an NRI, I dread having to face any tax inquiry from the Indian tax authorities, right? So I want to avoid that as much as possible. Ideally, I would like to just keep it simple as much as possible and take it away. So far, I think I've not had any major exit from India, so I've not really had to go through a detailed filing of a tax return and all of that. But that is one thing I dread. It's like also there could be unknowns like in the FEMA regulations that we have, and I sometimes dread these unknowns that I should not involuntarily break the law, right? In some ways or the other. And there are also various areas where, as an NRI, I probably cannot invest, and I'm not sure always if the founders are also aware as to whether they can accept money from NRIs and so on. So that is one area. The other thing is, and this is where I really appreciate San Angels a lot, is that if I'm doing this alone from the US or wherever else in the world, it is really difficult to find if the founders are trustworthy or not, right? And the basic due diligence that San Angel Networks does for people like us is invaluable, right? So now I can be reasonably assured that if San Angels is coming out with someone and basically bringing a startup for funding, then that basic due diligence at least has been. So that really is useful. The other minor challenge that we have faced, and I know Sriram also has faced this, is just transferring the funds. It takes an enormous time to transfer funds from the US. And basically, even when you wire funds, it's taken us a couple of weeks and several follow-ups with our bankers before the money got transferred, just because of the way the systems work as of now. So I felt that maybe we should all open up NRO accounts in India, transfer the money to the NRO accounts, and then transfer money from there. That would probably make it much simpler if you want to do it.
Yeah, that's true. I think one of the challenges, constant challenge and constant struggle is when fund gets transferred, how soon it can hit the startup's bank account kind of thing, and that always has been a challenge. And we have tried to dig into it, and every time we come with a different answers on that thing. Because one thing, when KYC, I think they have got something called Swift KYC, and in US people don't understand that Swift KYC. What is KYC? So those are the challenges which happens in just in terms of trust factor, because in from US perspective, once the fund is transferred from Swift, it is everything is done. From India perspective, RBI is much more stricter, so they ask for this KYC and other documentation. And sometimes I think the fund gets into that issue of US bank sending it KYC, not sending it KYC. But that is an issue. I completely agree with you. Maybe Sriram and Adip, you can touch on.
Oh, and sorry to interrupt, Sanjay.
Yeah.
One other thing that I really sometimes get bugged over is basically bureaucracy, right? So there is, in many cases, we have to have, like even now with startups, there are paper forms that get sent, and so we have to sign on paper, scan it, send it back. Sometimes I know people need power of attorney and all of that, right? So it becomes, in many ways, a nuisance, right? And I think from a startup perspective, it would help to do it digitally as much as possible. Now there are avenues where you can digitally sign and really get everything done, in an efficient way, and in a legal way digitally. And that is something that probably also we should look into.
Yeah, in fact, we had done for one startup. There is a company called legality.com, where you can sign a document legally online, and it is in Indian legal system, it is valid documentation kind of thing, no? But yeah, we probably need to insist startup to do more of those things. Again, it comes back to the part of the from the cost perspective. Startup is always a resource crunch, and whenever we have tried to ask them, this is okay, it's a little bit of cost kind of thing. So we would like to avoid that cost at a particular time, especially when we are doing a little bit of early stage of startups. So, but yeah, that's something more and more digital, as it becomes more cost effective, we can look into it, no? So Shriram and Adip, I thought that maybe it will be good if you can just look from the inside out perspective and say, how does NRI are helping the startup ecosystem in India, no? What are your views on that, no?
Just a quick one before one more risk that NRIs need to consider is the currency risk, both transaction as well as translation risks. That is something which one needs to figure out. You could be entering at when the dollar rupee is about 80, 83 levels. It could, when you're exiting, it could be anywhere. Forecasting is completely it's left to the market. One can't guess. So that's something that both translation and transaction risk on currency has to be carefully evaluated. Another area that I feel where NRIs generally have concern is patents. Are the patents located in India or in slightly better places like Singapore or UAE or UK or US? So that's another concern which I think one needs to, as an NRI, look at it from that perspective.
Shriram, more into this, how does NRI is helping the Indian startup ecosystem? Your thoughts on that?
So again, as I told you, in 2015, the ecosystem was predominantly smaller than what it is today, much smaller. Things have evolved. There are many more platforms that have been coming up. A lot of funds which are, coming forth. and raising money. One thing which the Indian diaspora living in, especially in the US and UK, have had soft corners for India. And with the growth story being what it is today, we are seeing that they are able to want to be associated back with their roots. And that is where we are seeing people investing. And Indian origin, people of Indian origin in the US, especially Silicon Valley, they have seen how the system really works. They have invested, they have been entrepreneurs, they have seen success, they've seen jackpots. So they understand the system well. And with India now evolving, coming to where US and China are in terms of startups, they have started looking at India as another avenue. What they bring is technology. So technology validation comes from, because predominantly they've been in Silicon Valley, or most of US, typically the Indian origin is all tech oriented. So you get a lot of tech validation that happens. There is in terms of corporate governance, we get to see an evolved contribution from NRIs. In terms of even patents, how do you protect? What are the entries to barrier? Whether the patent can happen in the US. A lot of minor things that an entrepreneur based in India may have overlooked. I'm not saying we would have overlooked, but may have overlooked. A lot of contribution coming in from the NRI. Plus, again, I think ticket sizes, if you look at it, a $10,000 check is that much easier for an NRI to invest than maybe an Indian entrepreneur who looks at 5 lakhs, with that much more care. But I think there is a lot more freedom, and there is a lot more risk-taking ability. Both the gentlemen said they are very protected, but yeah, the fact that they have been able to do cross-border investments in itself is a very, very high risk. And I think that is where we see a lot more improvements, at least in the startup space, Indian startup space.
Yeah, Adib, your view?
Yeah, I think it is the network, because when you are in India, I mean, I'm speaking the benefit that the venture is getting with NRI. So if they are able to tap into that network, and the NRIs who are out there in Silicon Valley or any of the other places, Singapore, etc. So they would be successful in terms of building a network. So if that network or a parts of that are also can get tapped by the venture, I think that creates a immense thing. Plus, of course, what Mr. Shriram has just said, all of those things are definitely there. And if you're looking at from the NRI's perspective, I think right now, both Manoj and Shriram Rao have talked about the fact that India is really kind of happening. So, and if you look at the opportunity, it will, and given that AIFs and entities like Sarthi and other angel network have come in, I think it has made the process somewhat much more enabled as of now for a standalone NRI sitting out there in California and to invest in an organization in India. So they otherwise would not have been able to look at it. Now they can through angel networks, or they can put in money in an AIF, which in turn is putting, so they don't actually have to know who they are, but they are at least participating in the growth and exciting growth, explosive growth story. So this is how I think it works.
Great. I have a theory here, which I have not validated kind of thing, but what I realized is since 2017-18 onwards, there is lot of interest about Indian startup ecosystem, And one of the reason in my theory is that earlier it used to be the real estate which NRI used to invest. And when this demonetization has happened, there is an alternate asset class which they were looking for, kind of thing. And the startup has become that alternate asset class. And if you see, more or less it kind of also is not that liquid. Same thing with real estate. It is a long term investment. Same thing is real estate. So somewhere I think that the ecosystem, the asset class characteristic also is very close, not exactly same as the real estate. And recently I also saw a news item where tier 2 tier 3 town also, they are looking at investing in startup ecosystem in India for the same reason, when they are moving away from real estate to the startup ecosystem. So very interesting dynamics is getting played, real estate asset class versus startup asset class. I think we are kind of got the last 7-8 minutes. So I will use that 7-8 minutes just to get your last closing word on the what advice you would like to give it to the NRIs or angel investors, no, in general. So starting with Sriram, you first. Sriram Sundaram.
Yeah, I think I've always been optimistic. Even though there have been a few hiccups, there are a lot of things that I've learned. And given the push that the government has been giving, this Startup India, there is, Scaling India, a lot of things that are being promoted, small ticket size loans being given to startup system. You have the women entrepreneurs who are coming up in Big Four. So this area looks very, very exciting. And earlier it used to be, the flavor would be fintech, edtech. Today we're talking about drones, we're talking about aerospace, we're talking about really deep tech. So the system is constantly evolving, and I think catching up with what the rest of the world is could have a slight edge. But this is where action seems in the next at least 5-10 years. And I think with active participation both from the NRI community and Indian investors, again, angels in India, exponential growth in terms of number of people coming into the system. So one needs to handhold, show them value, see how things are assessed before they make up their mind that this is very, very risky, or I'm not going to be interested in this. So that's where the handholding and other things will ensure that we go along with the growth story.
Yeah, I would say I agree with many of the points that Sriram, both the Srirams and Adip have made. But one point I would like to bring in is that people need to, so if an NRI or anyone rather wants to invest in startups, they can't really think of investing in 1, 2, 3 companies, because then that's more like buying a lottery ticket, right? So you may, the chances of success of any particular venture, I think, are about 40%. Now, the 40%, you're typically, the numbers say that you're going to hit it big only in about 10% of the cases. I would say that you need to spread your bets. You need to make sure that you are planning to invest in at least half a dozen companies, if not more, in order to just make it a viable proposition. It is obviously a high-risk business, but at the same time, I think it's great to be a part of this growth story, right? So just listening to the founders, seeing how the growth, what the growth opportunities are, in my mind, that itself is really very refreshing and rewarding. And I think the third thing is we as investors need to make sure that we are also looking into the founders' issues and trying to help the founders as much as possible, so that we can make it a success for all.
Yeah. Thanks, Manoj. Yeah, Sriram Rao.
One thing I would advise from personal experience is that, I've seen several economic cycles. I've seen opportunities float by, and I've always wanted to be I'm a very conservative investor, so I always looked like to make sure that the investment is a foolproof 100% before I invest. And I've seen that opportunities have just flown by. What I would strongly recommend is this is a legitimate opportunity, the startup investment. Do not sit in the sit by as the opportunities goes by. Jump in, work with like angel investment networks, with whoever you have experience with, your friends, your people that have experience investing in India startups. Like we have experience with San Angels, and I've had great experience. Work with them and jump in. So listen to pitches, start working on one or two of them, which kind of make sense for you. Only as you engage that you learn. If you sit in the ringside and just listen to Shark Tank India and all that, you will not gain much. You have to jump in and work with one or two of these, and then you may not invest in it, but you will learn so much from it that'll help you in the next investment. So jump in. This is a great opportunity, and as people have said, this is the opportunity for the next 5 to 10 years or so, and definitely take advantage of all the due diligence that happens through the angel investment networks. If you are a conservative investor like me, the due diligence definitely helps, and take advantage of it through these portals. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Seema. Adip?
Yeah, I think most of the points mentioned, I would probably be just endorsing. The only thing I'm repeating actually what my previous speaker Sri Ram Rao has mentioned. So actually, this is something that can only be learned by doing. So get in, and you've got to be at the deep end. You can't just be on the pool side. That's the key thing.
Yeah. And I'll just end with one statistics, I think, where registered startup in 2016 was about 452. Now is 80,000 plus. And there is a BCG report is there where it estimated in 2012 around July, where it said about 112,000 startups are there, and it's growing at 17% per annum. And I was doing a back of the envelope calculation. If it is 17% per annum, it means 50 startups, new startups every day it's coming. So there is no dearth of opportunity for NRIs to invest it. I think we have enough and more startups. And another interesting thing which was there was that what is impacting the startup in India. So there is this lot of bootstrap culture is there. So people wants to invest in their money, and that needs to change slowly. And then I think there's more money comes from the investors. That bootstrap culture also kind of keeps changing, kind of thing. No? So with that note, I will thank all the panelists. Thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.